Wow, my first year of college literally flew by. It's crazy how not even a year ago I was still in high school. I mean, to be fair, the school years are shorter, but I don't even know. Okay, so this video is going to be mainly me talking about different aspects like social life and academics, along with some anecdotes that I will try to keep in chronological order. That way it's fun to follow along. Let's begin with some background information, so just some things that I say or happen will make more sense. So, I go to a school with like 35,000 students. I'm a business marketing major, a commuter, and a full-time student. That should be enough context, so let's just get into this. I'm gonna gloss over my first month, as I made a video a while ago going very into depth about it, but here we go. Let's do this. So this is how my schedule for my first semester is looking like. For Mondays and Wednesdays, we got math at 8:30, then we got the math lab right after, followed by informational systems, IS, I'm going to be calling it IS. It is about like 40 minutes later from my math lab, so I have a little bit of a gap. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have English right at 8:30, and then Spanish directly after, and then University 100 right after that, which is just like a freshman class to introduce you to the university, you know? During the summer, I had to come in with a bunch of other incoming freshmen to make our schedules, and that was one of the classes they recommended we take, along with all the others on my schedule. So, first day, I end up making friends with the first person I talked to in my math class. We have our math lab together, as it's mostly the same people apart from those who don't need the lab credit. So naturally we sit next to each other in that class as well, and we become close pretty fast. After that though, I have IS, and holy shit. I knew this class was going to be bad the second I walked in. I feel like most people can predict the vibe of the class from the first minute of the professor speaking, and I was spot on with my prediction. This was such a useless class. Not because of the material, as I actually learned a lot of cool stuff from this class on my own, but keyword, on my own. The professor would barely talk about the material, often just yapping about irrelevant things. So right after my midterm in October, I decided to skip a class. Once I skipped one class, I wanted to skip again. And you know how that goes. The only time I showed up after that was for our final in December. I mean, he wasn't a bad guy or anything, he just wasn't teaching the course. There was around 2 to 4 homework assignments every single week, so when I wasn't in his class, at least at first, I would just do the homework, because I was doing the same thing while he was talking in class about whatever he felt like. So as I said previously, my first class on Tuesdays and Thursdays is English. It's a general English course, so there were all types of majors in this class. It was also the highest English you could be placed in, so luckily I didn't have to take a supplemental class for it. This class was literally just an English class. You learn English related things and you write essays. And in this class we had group activities basically every day, reading a lot of smaller things, which I definitely prefer over big readings. It was also cool because we were kind of forced to have social interaction, and even though I only really became friends with one guy in that class, it was still cool. And to transition that into my Spanish I had right after, this one guy also had Spanish right after, and that's the main reason we started talking. Like, we only spoke in there and never in English. I made friends instantly in that Spanish class though, as I think I just got lucky with the people in there. These guys had my same humor in everything. It was really fun, honestly. And this is the only time that I actually sat right up front for a class. Like, we were the front row. The professor really liked us, honestly, as well. We were probably the most engaged people in there, and while we did sometimes annoy her as she would have to tell us to stop talking a couple of times, I could tell that she definitely liked us more than everyone else. Because a lot of the times before class when we would see her come in, we would be outside or like the tables nearby, and she would always say like, "Hola chicos," and we would always say, "Hola profesora," you know, like we were always just talking to her. And she was an older lady too, so I'm sure she thought that we were really sweet. This class was filled with a lot of activities too, and while we did follow this one online book that we had to purchase, it was like $90 by the way for 1 year access. That's insane. But most of the stuff that we did followed that book, and she would print out like handouts and stuff sometimes, and we would do things with that too. Overall, that was probably my favorite class I took that semester, especially because it was Spanish, and I feel like as a Mexican, it's just a cool class to take. Later on in the semester, one thing me and these guys started to do before class, if we all arrived early enough, we would kind of walk out and there was a Dunkin' Donuts not far away from the campus, so we would just walk out and go to the Dunkin' and then come back. And we made it back on time, mostly, but she didn't really mind, as like I said before, we were the ones that were super active and participating, you know? Another thing we would always do is after the class ended, we would always walk together because the three of them would usually go to the gym, and on the way to the gym, my class was like near there. So until we hit that point, we would kind of just be talking. This next class though, University 100, was probably the easiest pass of my life. As I said earlier, it was more of a recommendation for freshmen to get free credits, and I can't even lie, they were definitely free credits. For almost the entire first half of the semester, I sat like a little bit to the front, but not all the way, and then to the far left side of the class. And I didn't really talk to many people or really have friends in that class until I don't even remember why or how, but I became friends with some of the guys who were sitting in the opposite side, so they were in the back right. And once it hit like the second half or something, I kind of switched to sitting near them. And these guys are pretty cool too. One of them actually makes music as well. I don't think we ever actually talked about it, but it was just something that we both knew about each other. Here's his stuff though if you want to check it out, so shout out to him. He's also in a frat, and he would be telling me about it because I'd always ask him just because I was so curious to know what it was like. And honestly, at least from what I heard, it didn't seem like anything too crazy, you know? Although I do remember he skipped probably a good month of the class just for like frat-lit related things. He came back though towards the end and he clutched up. One of the other guys though was hella chill, and I became close to him because he was usually there. And if he wasn't there, one of us would usually text each other like, hey, are you there? Are you going to class today? Are you skipping? So usually when one of us would miss, we would both miss. One cool thing that happened was the professor, or he wasn't even a professor, he actually worked somewhere in the offices for the university, but he was just the teacher for that class. But he brought in 2 real police officers, and we spent I think 2 classes learning CPR and other related things. We also learned about different types of danger with other people and stuff related to that. But most of the class was kind of just learning about basic things like, oh, mental health, oh, look at this resource we have at the school, oh, look at this resource we have at the school. And there was a lot of presentations from representatives of these resources coming in, and they were really, really boring. Although, I did learn more about the school, even though I haven't checked out many of the things, but I'm sure I will in the future. Honestly, the first half of the whole semester for all my classes was just very basic. You know, I would talk to a couple people, I would learn, and I would kind of just go home. During the middle of the semester though, me and the guy in my math class started talking to these 2 guys who sat in the back right of the class. I don't remember exactly how it started, but it was probably related to the first midterm that we took or the second midterm, and we were just talking about our scores or like what we put for a specific question or something like that. I'm not really too sure, but somehow we created like a friend group. So it was me and the guy that I sat next to, and then there's this white guy who's our age and he's pretty chill, and then there was this guy in his 30s, but he's still really cool. And I find it kind of amazing how we all just clicked, even though the 2 other guys I feel like were very different from me and my first friend, at least initially. One funny thing though with the white guy is that I found out during my midterm for my IS class, the last time I ever showed up before the final, that this guy was also in my IS. So right after that, when we noticed each other, we walked out together and we started talking. And I found out that he was skipping before I was, and that he stopped showing up like during this second week of school. And ever since then, neither of us showed up until, like I said, the final. Us not showing up though made a perfect opportunity for all 4 of us to do stuff together after our math lab. Now, one thing I would do right after this is I would talk to one of my friends from my high school who had a little break in between his classes. I mentioned him in another video last year. My math lab finished at 10:50 or 10:55, and his next class didn't start until 11:30ish. So we would kind of just talk every day until then, and sometimes I would take him to his world religions class. Sometimes he would take me to my IS class when I would go. So the new routine kind of became, after our math lab, I would either talk to him and then go hang out with my math group, or if he didn't show up, I would just directly hang out with my math group, maybe go to the library or something right after our lab class. I think the coolest thing that we started doing though was playing catch. Me and my first friend both had a liking for baseball, and one day he brought up the idea of bringing a ball and a glove, and I was so down for it. Now, the other 2 guys have never played baseball in their life before, so we had to teach them. But we would spend a lot of our days together just catching the ball and throwing it around. I have video footage here. This is the first time we ever did it, and I think this was one of the first things we ever did as a group. Another cool thing I remember us doing is we went to this VR room that we had in the library, which I didn't even know existed until it ended up happening. I have a picture here as well. It looks really cool. I didn't actually try the VR just because I was afraid to get motion sick, but everyone else was on it, and it was one of those days where college kind of felt like college, you know? These guys were the only people that I would do stuff outside of class with, really, so they kind of filled out my expectations of what I originally thought college would be like when you're not in class, but you're just doing stuff with your friends. And then came December, and our first semester was coming to a conclusion. This is when we all kind of locked in, and I spent again most of my time with my math group, and we started renting out the study spaces at the library. We would just go through the material throughout the semester to study, and we even had a couple of other people from our math class that were kind of chill with us to come study with us, you know? Then I remember the day of the final. We all got there relatively early. The final wasn't until I think maybe 1 o'clock, and we were all there around 10. We got food together for the last time, and after that we headed straight to the library to do our last checkup in terms of studying. After about an hour or so, we decided that it was time to head to where the final was going to be at. I look in the door and I see her putting everything out, setting everything up, and I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna get real. By the way, 3 of us in that group, of course all the people who are 18 are not doing the best, as I for one had a D in that class and I was trying to get a C. I am notoriously horrible when it comes to math tests, so I have failed every single one that I've taken this semester so far, which means I really have to lock in for this one. So we all get into the room, we put our phones in our backpacks all in the front, we take our pencils out, and she tells us to turn over our papers and begin the test. And honestly, I felt like I was pretty prepared, and I can't lie, I took forever. I was literally the last person or second to last. It might have been my friend actually, but the point is I am not very confident. I think I was doing okay, but part of me didn't have much faith in myself as I genuinely did not know some of the questions. After me and him both finished, we actually both finished like in the span of 2 minutes from each other or something like that. That's why I don't remember if I was last or he was last. But after I found out that the other 2 guys were there waiting for us and we walk out together, you know, and one by one we were each like, okay, time for me to go home. It felt very bittersweet because we were all relieved that we finished the course, because that was an insanely hard math course, by the way. It was my introduction to actual calculus, aside from pre-calc, but it was also sad because that was the reason we started to become friends. And we knew that next semester it was going to be way different, as we had already done our schedules. I had my Spanish final the day before actually, and I got to say goodbye to my friends in that group as well because we did so much together, honestly, even though it was either in between or during class. The final was actually so easy. We all kinda knew we got A's on it immediately after we finished. I guess all the participation paid off, so make sure you pay attention in your classes, guys. It will genuinely help you so much. All my other ones though, I didn't care too much about. Even the one I also had friends in, which was my University 100. But that was because we were pretty inconsistent with showing up anyways, and we all just found that class pretty useless and were excited for it to be over. That class also did not have a final, and I remember on the last day, we showed up and the professor, teacher, whatever this guy was, decided to cancel the class when we were already there. It was cool though, because we got to walk out together for one last time and just talk. Another thing I started doing towards the last few weeks of the semester was going to the gym. I actually signed up when I was still 17 in the very beginning of the semester, and they told me I needed a parent's signature, so the next day I kind of forged it and handed it in, and it was all good. I didn't actually use it though, as the time I went to scope it out was super packed, but it was the only really convenient time as I was starting at 8:30 every day. But during those last few weeks, I would either skip my English class or it would get canceled. So I would work out during that time slot and just go to my Spanish right after. I wanted to do it more, but I only really did it about like 8 times, maybe, probably less. But in the next video when I talk about next semester, you'll see I lock in a little more. Overall, my first semester really felt like what college was supposed to feel like, especially once I hit the halfway mark and I started doing things with my friends outside of class but still on campus. It was challenging for sure, probably around the level I originally thought it would be, even though most of it came from math. It was cool though, and I felt very mature and responsible as by the end, I was a legal adult, although I couldn't drive yet, so having to get picked up and dropped off every day felt pretty embarrassing, I have to admit. This still was how it worked during the second semester even after I got my license, just because I didn't have a car and I still don't have a car, so pray for me guys, soon. But thank you so much for listening to me talk about my first semester. I hope that you found it enjoyable or that you learned something, anything from it. And I hope that you guys all have a great rest of your day, night, afternoon, or just whatever, you know? Alright, thank you. See ya.